The first group home that I went to, it was called Secret Harbor School. It was on a remote island. I mean, this island was so small, we used to call it Little Alcatraz. It felt like training camp for prison. You know, like they were trying to get our minds ready to be incarcerated later.
Statistics show those who have gone through the foster care system are also more likely to end up in prison. But those numbers also overlap with so many other societal problems, including education and mental health. To talk about all of that, we are joined by Yukari Kane of the Prison Journalism Project and Don Rains, Chief Policy and Strategy Officer for Treehouse, a nonprofit that supports foster kids. Thank you both for being here. Why is recognizing the foster care to prison pipeline so important?
For us in Washington State, and I think this holds up across the country, 40% of the young people in our juvenile rehabilitation system have been in foster care, and 80% of their families have had some traffic with Child Protective Services or the Child Welfare Agency. And that to us means it is a systemic problem. It's not a case of kids just being bad. So that is why we have chosen to place so much emphasis on doing what we can to disrupt the foster care to prison pipeline.
Probably the main factor that contributed to me coming to prison was being programmed through group homes. In prison, we're dehumanized just like we were in foster care. I mean, you treat somebody like an animal for a long period of time, and they start to believe they're an animal, and they start to act like an animal. And I think that the foster system and these group homes doing that to people, that's how institutionalization happens, right?
And how does being raised in foster care, the system, lead to higher rates of incarceration, you think?
Well, if you think about it, for our young people who end up in our juvenile rehabilitation system or incarcerated as adults, I mean, we always think about it as, already at least two systems have failed them. First, they are in families that are very, very highly impacted by poverty and by systemic racism. And they are removed from their families for their own safety, but we know that there is systemic racism at every decision point in the child welfare system, from the kids who get referred to the kids who get the cases that get investigated, to the children who are removed from their homes. And then, we send these young people to school. And they are then again, oftentimes, our kids are having perfectly normal reactions to very challenging circumstances in their lives. If you can imagine being removed from your home, being placed in the homes of strangers, often, sometimes without your siblings, and then it's not surprising that they show up at school with behavioral challenges. We find that our youth are getting suspended and expelled at about 3.5 times the rate of their peers. And we know that suspensions and expulsions, particularly in that middle school and early high school time, lead to, lower graduation rates, which then, has this compounding effect of, leading to poverty, unemployment, homelessness, and often incarceration for crimes of survival.
And Yukari, there have been multiple stories on the Prison Journalism Project from incarcerated men who were raised by the state. How do their stories tie into all of this?
I mean, I think, we at the Prison Journalism Project is always trying to raise issues that our writers want to talk about. And this was one of them where we weren't necessarily focused on it, but we had writers who told us that this was important, and this was important for outside readers to know. And I think what they do is to show us what that world looks like. One of the writers, actually both writers, write about how incarceration is almost inevitable when the boys' homes that they end up with is almost like being incarcerated, and just really how they haven't gotten a lot of the chances and opportunities that a lot of us take for granted.
In my memory, when I think back it always seems to be surrounded by this dark cloud. It felt like a really dark time in my life, and then being there, the way that it was ran was just, it was insane. I mean, if you refused a directive or questioned a directive, the staff were grabbing you and they were throwing you on the floor. This was common practice. You know, you'd go face down with your arms wrenched behind your back, and this was happening multiple times a day there. You know, and there were kids being sexually assaulted by staff. I seen this. You know, I was 14 years old. I didn't know what to do about it. There was nothing I could do.
And 80% of kids in foster care suffer significant mental health issues, including being diagnosed with PTSD. And we're talking at twice the rate of war veterans. What is causing these mental health issues, and why aren't kids getting enough support for them?
You can imagine that we have designed a system that is essentially designed to sever relationships. The systems don't do a great job at keeping young people, when it is essential to remove a child from their home for their own safety, ideally so that a parent or parents have the opportunity to address what might be happening in their lives. So many of our kids are coming into care because of neglect that is related to substance abuse disorder and mental health issues to begin with. So then we take kids out of their family, which is traumatizing in itself. We place them either with a relative or with a licensed foster parent. And then they're often moved around again and again and again. And there is no relationship continuity. And so you don't actually develop the trust or the skills to maintain long-term relationships. It basically creates a situation where kids are constantly, the cortisol levels in their bodies are really high. They're constantly in a state of fight or flight. We have the young people that we work with at Treehouse, they are so focused on survival and today, like the idea of talking to them about a goal or high school graduation as an ultimate, thing that they might want to achieve. Oftentimes when we begin working with them is a really foreign concept because they're just worried about today. Where are they going to get, are they going to be fed? How are they going to be treated in the families that they're placed with? Am I going to get to see my mom this week? They can't worry about their math test. They are in complete survival mode. And so you can understand why that PTSD, that anxiety, that depression really, really sets in. And I have to say, what is happening with the pandemic has just exacerbated all of the already challenging circumstances that they find themselves in. The constant, we always say that school, often offered both caregivers and young people kind of respite from one another. It's a 6 or 7 hour period of the day where you got to engage with other people and have, social interaction, and also just, kind of diffuse tension. And the remote, remote schooling has been very, very challenging for our young people.
I just also wanted to add to that one of our writers has talked about having a sister and how much more challenging it is for girls than boys. I don't know, Dawn, if you could talk a little bit about that, but we've heard about how boys can always. I don't know if this is a great solution, but they could run away from home, whereas girls are. There's more danger for them and risk out on the streets, and that their options of dealing with not great situations are more limited.
I think that's true, although I think times are changing because we actually find that more of our girls run away now from foster care placements than boys. And it is really dangerous. Actually, kids of both genders actually, generally within days of running from their foster care placements are often found in very dangerous situations where they're being trafficked. It's bad for both genders. It's particularly bad for girls.
Gotcha. And it's such an important conversation. And I'm glad you mentioned earlier as well, that trust component. I think that's a vital part to keeping this conversation going and making some changes and hopefully reducing those numbers in that pipeline we've been talking about. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.